Hello everyone, How to Make Games here, and for this series I am going to be teaching how to program in C++ using the software CodeBlocks. For those who don't know, CodeBlocks, if you go to the website codeblocks.org, is an open source program, meaning it's free, and that lets you create programs using C, C++, and other languages too. Now, if you want to follow along to this series, you can go to the download page and click download the binary release, and then follow the steps for the various operating systems. So, how to get started with CodeBlocks. What you're going to do is create a new project after you download it, and what we're going to do is make a console application, and we're going to be programming in C++. And as for the title, just name it something relevant to what the program is for. In this case, it's going to be C++ Basics. And I'm just going to create a new folder, which is going to be for C++ programming, and it saves onto the desktop. And then for our compiler, we're going to use the GNU GCC compiler. And once I click Finish, this is what comes up. You have a sources folder with a main.cpp file. So now we are set up with our program file. But before we begin, I just want to give an orientation on what you see here in this file. First, we have #include IOStream. This is referred to as a directive. Now, a directive is defined by this #, and in this case, we are including a file known as IOStream. What IOStream does is allow for basic input and output, such as this cout statement for hello world. I'll get to what cout does later. And then you have using namespace standard, which all this really does is make it so I can use cout and endl without saying std and then : on both of these. So it just makes writing it easier. However, it is always important to use namespace standard whenever you want to use cout and new lines. And then we have this main function. This is known as your main driver, and it's going to be the line of code that your program starts with and then ends with. However, your program doesn't end at this closing brace here. It ends when it sees this return 0 line. And what return 0 says is that your program compiled and ran perfectly fine without errors. Meaning without the return 0 line and without the main function itself, the program won't be able to run. So then, I have this hello world statement with this cout. What cout does is display text or some sort of the value stored into a variable onto the terminal. And then you have this endl, which just creates a new line. So now as for actually running our program. Up here you have these icons. One is a gear-shaped icon for building, one is an arrow for running, and then a combination of the two for build and run. If you click build, it compiles your program using the compiler that you selected. And what compiling means is that it takes your program and it converts it to binary for your computer to read. However, if there's syntax errors, like an extra curly brace, your compiler will show an error, and it'll flag the exact line of code that it is, and then give you a description of that error. Otherwise, if there's no syntax errors, it will compile fine. And then there's the run button, which just runs your program. So as you can see, the cout hello world is couting the text hello world and then creating a new line, which is why there's this blank space here. And then what this last bit tells you the value returned at the end of your main function, which is return 0. So that means our program ran fine. And then how long it took the program to execute. And then press any key to continue, which just closes the terminal. And that's also what we mean by console application. This black box here is what our application is going to be displayed in. Also, do not close out of this console by clicking close, otherwise you get this terminated error. It isn't really an error with your program, it's just that the terminal closed out wrong. Oh yeah, one last thing. These arrows here, these are just they are really just step-by-step guides of what to see out, because if I were to just do hello world new line, it returns an error. So I just need to use this symbol, which is known as an insertion operator, to insert the values to the terminal. So if any of this seems confusing, don't worry about it for now, because we're going to start off with just very basic low-level stuff. And this episode is really just an orientation to the software, along with just an orientation to the software. I'm just going to comment out some code. You do that with / twice. And comments do not affect your program. They're just for you to be able to read it in order to understand what's going on. So, now that we have a basic idea of what to do to create the program and what each of these words mean with the program, we can start actually making a program that actually does something. So in the next episode, we are going to go over variables. So once again, if you want to follow along better, you can always go to codeblocks.org and download a program, assuming that you have one of these operating systems, which really I don't think there are that many other operating systems. And as we continue creating our programs and learning what each thing does, then we'll be able to actually deepen the understanding of how C++ works and what even goes on when we're programming at a higher level when we're using, say, Unity in order to use rigid bodies and vectors and all that. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one where we go about variables and variable manipulation. Goodbye.